Welcome to On the X. Today's episode is another in our Mind Matters series, where we dig into the habits, mindsets, and lessons that build mental fitness. In this episode, Jeff and I talk about something that came up repeatedly in a recent listener survey: finding purpose and identity after transition. Whether it's leaving the military, changing careers, or moving through one of life's many in-between stages, those transitions can leave you questioning who you are and what comes next. We share some of our own experiences with major transitions, what we've learned along the way, and how to navigate those moments with clarity and intention. So here we go with Mind Matters on the X. Today we're going to sort of focus on essentially transition and purpose, specifically after service. So I think for a lot of veterans, that can be a challenge. And I think too, this can apply to anybody. It's funny. I was asked to speak at our high school for Veterans Day. The whoever at the school,
Nice.
hey, do you want to, I don't know. And I found out that my oldest son had actually thrown my name in the hat last year for this. And they were like combing through. They're like, we need somebody or whatever. Like, oh, go ask him. But, I kind of, in that speech, I specifically wanted to talk about what veterans can bring to the table and then how that can help others, specifically veteran stuff. Like, I didn't want to get into here's the lessons learned from the time in the military, but here's what I learned after service that I think can then apply back to everyday people, right? And I was mainly addressing sort of the student body there, but it's also the adults in the room, and there were some parents there and teachers certainly, and school administrators. And one of my things was purpose, and about transition, and the fact that it's not just a military thing. It's not like, okay, that's the only time you have this big transition in your life. You in high school, and you go into college, and then you end college and you go into the civilian workforce, right? Like you keep having these times in your life where you sort of get comfortable doing something, and now you got to be uncomfortable again, being a new guy or a new person in the field. And knowing how to do that effectively is really important. And I think it is a skill that we should learn how to develop earlier in life, because it's not something that I think we ever explicitly, for the most part, teach people. Yeah. I mean, we have like TAPS getting out of the military, which is a woefully, I would say, underdone thing. I mean, they do their best, obviously, but it's not at the level of some of the other programs in there that like we fund with the Honor Foundation. I just had Matt Stevens, who's the CEO, on this podcast, and he talked about that, because that's exactly what they do. And part of what they do is actually kind of talk about purpose and finding your why and everything. So you had said, as we were talking before this, that maybe it might be best for us to just provide our own personal perspectives on transition, what that was like for us, and maybe the purpose piece specifically, what that looked like for us. So why don't you go first?
Yeah. I'll talk about when I got off active duty. And I agree with you that people who serve in the military can really relate to anyone out there who has to make a transition like this, a professional transition. So we're talking about both, I think, identity and purpose. They're related. Boy, mine was unique. You know my story, but I'll share it with people if I haven't before. I left active duty in 2006 and found myself in New York City working to become a paid professional guitar player. That sounds insane, and looking back, it kind of was. So the things I had to deal with were finances. I had to deal with hours working. I had to deal with a whole new skill set. And I can even remember a couple of days where I stayed in the reserves too. So on a drill weekend, on a Sunday or a Saturday, I would go in for a half a day of work at the drill weekend, or a full day out in the Bronx at the reserve center, drive into Manhattan. In my car, I would change from khakis to black pants, black sneakers, black top, because that's what orchestra pit members have to wear. And just in the car, being like, feeling like Superman, like whole different mindset, whole different approach to the work. So that took a long time to get used to. I don't know that I ever got really used to it. And, you talk about transitioning as a skill to teach people. I don't know how much this can be taught. I think a lot of this there's a lot of listeners who can just relate to this. Like, you just have to get thrown in the fire sometimes and deal with it. But it is not easy. Finding purpose, finding a new identity where we fit in is so important. And it can be a struggle. Um, I struggled with literally the hours I was working from from daylight hours to Broadway shows at night. Um, Healthcare. I had to deal with like people who had just been like artists their whole life. Now that's the people I'm hanging out rather than military professional members, leaders, service members, veterans, combat veterans, highly trained people to like I remember one drummer at the Broadway show Wicked one day. I go in early. I was playing a Wicked show at night, and another guy came in who was a sub like me. He wasn't the main person, but the main person was out on vacation or something. So he brought in one of his other drummers, and the guy just comes in and goes right up into my face, and he goes, "I'm so high right now. I'm so worried I'm going to get fired from this." So that's my coworker. The dude did fine. He hung with it. Um, and we're laughing about it now, but yeah, it is a hard thing to transition in life to a whole new career, a whole new place, location, whole new culture, whole new set of values, different clothes, you know. Um, so that's kind of I guess my story. What about you? What did you do?
Well, so yeah, a couple things out of that though that I think are important to highlight. One is the yeah, it's not that transitioning is like in and of itself is a skill to teach. I think it's more the mindset of going into that that's important. The sort of that is the piece that I think can be taught a little bit, right? That piece of it, specifically with things like purpose,
Yeah.
because like for you doing that, before I kind of go into my own story here, did you think about that exact thing, purpose? Did you think about what's my purpose now,
No.
or what's my identity now?
I would say no. I was a younger guy. It was not. I think it was subconsciously there. Like, I wanted to be a reliable, professional, capable, punctual performer that could jump into these different groups and perform and be really dependable. But it wasn't something I sat and wrote out and put on a whiteboard
Yep.
or posted on my, any social media account. I knew I had to do that stuff. It was more subconscious for me.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Uh, my story is that I got off active duty in 2011. I didn't know at all what I wanted to do. I just, at the time, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff I could talk about, kind of mental health and everything, but I want to kind of stick on this sort of transitioning purpose identity piece of this. But I just knew, okay, it's not that I'm not capable, but I'm just kind of, my head is not in this appropriately anymore. And I knew that about myself, but I had no clue what I wanted to go do at all. And I just remember I did all the kind of the job search things where
Hmm.
I don't know what they were at the monster.com, whatever, they're like,
Yeah.
looking for jobs like that. And then there's military hunters. There's what is it? Lucas Group, I think is the name of that one company. Talk to some of those folks. And there weren't the resources that there are now. Like certainly in our community now, we've got these like cohort kind of mini MBA that's specifically designed for sort of career transition, really get you set up. Didn't exist back then. It was just, hey, good luck kind of thing, and which is fine. That's what it had always been up until that point. I did TAPS
Yeah.
and all that, but I just remember I did a couple things. I had an interview with a guy where literally the job was being a floor manager at a pretzel factory. And I don't even know why. I feel bad in retrospect, like I wasted this guy's time, but I just kind of like wanted to hear the pitch and where he thought I would fit in. And I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm the executive officer of a naval special warfare unit, and this is what my next job is potentially going to be. Like, you know what I mean?
Ew.
And that sounds like I'm not denigrating people that do that at all, but it just, in terms of like a career progression, it just was like, that doesn't seem right to me, nor does it seem like where I would likely kind of fit in. And then I went to a teacher hiring conference in Boston and I had no credentials to be a teacher. And it's like where you're up on this board and then the schools like interview people. And I ended up with one interview, like one school that was potentially interested in me, talking about me being a math teacher. And I didn't even, it was a 2-day conference. I didn't even go back to the second day. I was just like, no, I just couldn't. And it was really hard.
Yeah.
And then this thing fell in my lap where I was going to do this investment research company. It was in the Virgin Islands and, but even that then ended up not being a good fit, where I thought it was a sales position. There were a bunch of other former guys from my community in that group. And it was like, I think I was like enticed by like, oh, you can make a lot of money and you're going to live in St. Thomas and everything. And the St. Thomas part was really cool, but I was not good at it. I didn't like it. I just learned very quickly that it was like, wow, this is not fun. I don't enjoy this. And I suck at it. I was, and so there was a bunch of stuff that came out of that where I had to learn that you're not going to be good at everything. You come from this culture of like, I'm going to crush anything. And like, well, maybe not, and you might not knock it out of the park on your first try, and then luckily from that, we started a CrossFit gym that was really fun. And there was a lot of kind of purpose behind that. And then I got the role at Killcliff and that was really fun. And so I eventually kind of landed in roles where I had it felt a lot more purpose driven and whatnot. But sort of the same thing. I never threw that thought about purpose really, or identity.
Yeah.
It was more just about like accomplishment.
You said a couple of things I think that are key here, which is you didn't find things that you were interested in at first.
Yeah.
And of course, if we're going to talk about finding purpose and finding identity, we got to be sincere about our identity. And not everyone can get their dream job, right? That's a delusional, approach to making a transition of professional. We're talking about professional transitions here. But man, there has to be some level of interest if we're going to want to stick with it. For me, going into music, my interest level was pegged. I mean, it was
For sure.
100%. I'd wanted to do that since I was a kid. And I have family members who got in music. It was very, in my mind, a very realistic thing to do. As hard as it was, I think because my interest level was so high, even when, it was freelance and when times were tough and I wasn't getting a lot of work, my interest would just get me through it. I was like, I just love this. I just want, I'll take a little bit at a time, even if I don't make it right away. So, but for you, yeah, you had to keep trying a few things. And a word came to mind here which is flexibility. Talk about this a lot with people in therapy sessions. And I think you and I both had to have a lot of flexibility as we tried different things out, underwent the challenges, underwent obstacles to find something. And I'm talking about mental flexibility. Like we can't be rigid. Like it has to be this one thing, because you don't know right away how much you're going to like it, how much you're going to like just the work, but also the people around you and the environment, the expectations and the values. And maybe that's something that could be taught. Maybe that's a skill that can be learned. I certainly know in the military, and you can probably relate to this, there's a lot of areas of the military that preach not having flexibility. We are, we're very rigid. This is how we approach work and this is what we are and this is how we do it every single time. That's a tougher move, whether you're military or non-military. If you come from a background like that, that's going to be a tougher transition than somebody who's open-minded, willing to try, willing to fail, willing to move too.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a couple things on all of that. I think that just from a purely sort of pragmatic standpoint, I think one of the important things to take away from any kind of transition is it can be either way. In fact, I'd never really focused on this, but you clearly had a thing. I want to do this. I know what I want to do. And I had no clue. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I was even dabbling with like entrepreneurial stuff, and I'd read 4 Hour Work Week, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can do, something like that. And either one of those is okay. And I think that that was a really important learning for me, was that if you have a very specific idea of what you want to do, great. If you don't, that's okay too. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay to not have an idea. The other thing is, it's okay to not hit a home run the first time out. I
Yeah.
think that's a really important thing to latch onto, is like I did. You might land on a job and realize this is not for me. And that's okay. And you might not be good at it either, but you're going to learn something out of that. Like I said, I learned that I'm not a sales guy. I don't like sales. I don't like trying to sell stuff to people. I'm funny being in nonprofit. I don't like asking people for money. It's just not my thing. And that was an important learning for me. I eventually learned that the thing I like is marketing. I like the creative side of things, whatever that might look like. But I didn't really know that until I kind of went on a little bit of an exploration. And that's okay too. And with that in mind, I think it's okay too. Like, you don't have to gut it out, I think, is a really important thing to learn too. It's like, if you land in something and it's not for you, that it's okay, because we come from this don't quit mentality of like, don't
Yeah.
quit. And so I think that carries with it sometimes this idea that you just have to just stick with it, man. Just gut it out. This is not life or death. This is not, no fail mission or something like that. It's just a job.
Yeah,
you know?
I think you're talking about like this sort of mental flexibility. You had mental flexibility in what it's going to be. I had to have flexibility in the success of what I'm doing. I wanted to be in one kind of area in New York City,
Yeah.
in music, in performance, but I had to be flexible with, hey, dude, this month you might make hardly anything. Next month you got a few things on the
Yeah.
book, and the stress of that, and that's what I had to deal with. And I want to talk. I think involved in this is, yeah, humility has to be experienced too. And I want to give one example. One of my clients I met with just a few days ago he's a Navy veteran. He was an operations specialist,
Mhm.
um, and deployed with some special forces teams, North Africa. So he was around and in combat. And um, he works outside the military, but he's a government contractor and highly successful. Manages a team of people. It's got all the clearances you could ever want, making good money. It's got some legal trouble right now because of a DUI. And
Mm.
the discussion going into it, I didn't know he's a new client, so I didn't know how I was going to come around to this, but I was ready to kind of emphasize to him, like, you have to have this flexibility at this point, because I know he wants to keep working, but his whole field might have to change in a big way. And he was talking about
Mm.
it, I thought, really beautifully. He's like, if I have to be a barista for a year or two, I'll just do that. I want to keep my apartment. I want to keep my relationships and keep the stability. Um, he was looking into a lot of different things. So for him, he's got to have flexibility and, pay and place and expect all these different expectations. And it's flexibility and it's humility, you don't, like you said, you don't have to hold on to something. You don't have to have this rigid thinking about its pass or its success or its failure. And success means we push, push, push it until we absolutely topple over. And I also will admit to you, man, I'm a little bit hypocritical here because I really pushed music really far, probably a few years farther than I should have. But then again, I just loved it. I was so into
Yeah.
it. And I made
Yeah.
a big transition to this work that I'm doing right now. So I've learned these lessons a hard way, as many
And I
people have.
think that, yeah, your journey in that regard is a good one to highlight. I keep backing up from this microphone where I'm getting more and more relaxed, where I'm laying back in the chair and it's like people aren't even be able to hear me. But as you know, I've always had an extreme amount of admiration for you when you went for it with that after the military, because I understood the risks involved with that in terms of financial security and where you had to live and all of that. But we always knew you were an extremely talented musician. It was like, that's awesome. I'm super glad for. But then the harder one for you, I think, was when it was like, okay, that's not really going to work long term as a career. It's going to be a hobby. It's going to be a passion of yours, but I need to do something else. And that's actually where I saw you struggling more, where you tried to figure out what could be something else after that. And I think that's another important thing about this is that this may happen multiple times in your life, you
Yeah.
know? And so this kind of gets back to the whole thing of I just think it's one of these that I think the teachable thing here is so we tie it back to kind of purpose and identity. I feel like there's a lot of people that believe that purpose is something you sort of find or it's given to you. I think there's a lot of that idea, like that idea is in the military a lot of like the military gave me purpose. You
Yeah.
hear that a lot.
Yes,
And
indeed.
this has become something that I'm so opposed to at this point. Like the military doesn't give you purpose. Like purpose is it's not just out there and it's not under a rock or something. It's not something, oh, sweet, I found my purpose here. That's where it was, you know. It is something you create. And to me, it's grown from your value structure. And I just feel like what we did with the military was we had kind of an innate value structure that we probably didn't ever explicitly bring forth, but we saw it reflected in the military. And so we sought out that profession. But I think the skill that you can get way earlier in life is really define your value structure and define what that looks like in practice for you.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. You can kind of like you can do the Simon Sinek start with why. You can do his whole kind of like find your why workbook, and that's great. Like there's a lot of people that think that's a good way to do it. Um, but I think it can be as simple as spending some time. What are your values and what are your anti-values too? Like what are the things you don't support?
Yeah.
And then whether it's a personal mission statement or it's some sentences, it's important to say what that looks like in real life. So it's one thing to just say honor, courage, and commitment. Right. Okay, got it. Yeah. Who's going to argue with that? Like no one's honor's a bad thing. There's not anybody out there that's going to argue. But like, what does that actually look like in practice for you? And this is something that actually I've learned very recently. Okay, well, what is that? How do you enact that daily? Like put that in a sentence. That's the challenge, I think. And then it's okay, how do I live a life that coincides with that lives up to that, you know? And that might be somewhat through your work, but it's not, but that's only a piece of it too. I mean, that whole notion too, that your job, like your purpose is almost tied to your job is another thing that I think we got to break free from a little bit.
Yeah, I would push back on that a little bit though. I think a lot of people do find themselves in different occupations, certainly in the military, and suddenly it makes sense. Like suddenly, like this is worth doing.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, but like you said, they kind of you saw that they probably saw that coming into it. It's why you enlist. It's why you sign up. It's why you
Yeah.
commit.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, what you're talking about values, I think, it's so important, to get some awareness around that as early as you can in life. I don't know that I really had a conscious awareness of that, as a young man.
I don't
But it
think I
was
did.
certainly a thing that drove me and drives all of us. And I'll say this too, in mental health, we a lot of times this is the discussion. When people come in and they have, say, survivor's guilt or really relationship problems or real just stress in their lives and anxiety and depression too. It's tied to they're really not living and behaving according to their value system. That's where the
Yeah.
conflict is.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
and that can be kind of worked out, with certain things like survivor's guilt. We can talk through some things and point out maybe your take on it is not exactly correct, but um, this is where humans, we especially in this day and age, where we're not so much fighting just to survive, we have survived. We're just trying to find comfort and peace and meaning and purpose. When we are not living according to these values, there's that stress inside, and it's like you feel it in your gut. Some people say, or you're not sleeping well at night. And I think this is important to recognize sometimes with people, like for all of us, it sure feels good to live according to our values, but we don't have awareness on that all the time. Is that something that
Yeah.
you have consciously embraced in your life? Kind of what your values are? Have you literally written them out? Because some people do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. And I mean, I still play with it. I still toy around with it. And it's like that my sort of personal mission statement keeps sort of flexing on me. But I think that's okay too. The
Yeah.
Simon Sinek stuff is very much, it's sort of like once you find your why, that is your why. And anything that you do in life is basically going to go back to that. His method is something that I keep, maybe you and I can do it at some point. You need another person and you need hours to do this, where it's basically, I'm not telling you, well, here's what I think my why is. I basically tell a bunch of stories from my life, and then you pull out the
Mm.
common theme from that. And I really
Yeah.
want to do this exercise, but I need to go back and review the stipulations in it, because I believe it can't be somebody or it shouldn't be somebody who knows you extremely well, because there can be a bias there. Whereas if you're sort of saying things to somebody who doesn't know a lot about you, they're much more objective. And there's, right, because for you and I, we already have a filter that we're seeing each other through, where it's like, I know Jeff and I know what he likes and I know what he doesn't like and everything. And I think it's important. I think part of the idea is to strip that away, where you don't have that. But it's a cool methodology, and I'd really like to do it. But I also I believe that, and maybe it's a slightly different thing, that your sort of mission, whatever, can change over time. Because I don't like this idea of being locked into, okay, that's what it
Oh
is
yeah,
for the rest of your life,
I
you
agree.
know. Um, and on the sort of the job and purpose that's coming out of that, the challenge for a lot of people, myself included, is if you come off of a job of being like a Navy SEAL for 20 years, yeah, to find something that sort of like
Mm.
seems like it's at that level, that's hard, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because you're not going to go find something else where you're killing terrorists and rescuing hostages, right? Like that's probably not on the table for you.
Mhm.
Um, but then again, I think that's why an analysis of it is really important, is saying like, okay, take away the action itself. Why, what about it? What about doing that lit you up? Why were you interested in that? Right? Like if you take away, what's the kind of the underlying theme there of why that felt important to you, or why you were drawn to that? And that's the thing I think it's important to spend time with, because yes, you're not going to get back to that potentially, like that specific action or that group of actions. But
Yeah.
but the
It's not
idea
gonna
is
look
like, can you,
like it did before. It's not gonna look like it did before.
no,
Yeah.
but can you pull out the underlying theme of that, and the sort of the value under it that you were drawn to, and figure out something else that aligns with it? I think that's
Yeah.
the important thing to do.
And you're talking about spending time with that and reflecting on it, how important that can be. If someone feels like you don't have purpose, if you don't have meaning, if you don't have identity, then yeah, getting down into that, those are really healthy discussions. Those can be really a kind of epiphanal moments, I think, where people can
Yeah.
say, okay, now I can release my grasp on all these expectations I had and whatever frustrations I had, and it's not working, and you can see the opportunities.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
and
this
the
this
identity,
takes
yeah,
effort.
go ahead.
I was gonna say this
Yeah.
takes it takes commitment. It take being reflective like this and talking to people and getting your support system to give you feedback on it. And we gotta be. It takes effort to do that.
Yeah. It's funny, the identity thing, yeah, is obviously tied to this in a huge way. And I've thought about this recently. Things like, once a Marine, always a Marine. That's obviously comes from a very good place. And there's pride behind that I think is important. But I also think it has the potential to backfire, in the
Oh yeah.
sense that it is, again, this is what you are, not something you did. It's what you are, and you will always be. And again, for some people that really works. And I've seen
Yes.
that, right? That's me, and that's what I'm all about, and I will always be that, even if I'm no longer in the service, and I can. But for some people, it's not the best thing, because again, it feels like, well, that's the best I'll ever be, and I'll always be that, but I'm not doing it anymore, and I think
Yeah.
that's a downside. It's sort of like I'm a Navy SEAL, or even I was, because you're using that verb to be in there, not do. It's not a job. It's part of who you are.
Yeah.
And I think it can be valuable to sort of say, okay, does that serve me? I'm gonna probably still always use that terminology, but can I just say, can I interpret that as that's a job I did, and it was a really important job, and I'm proud of the work I did there and the brotherhood that I had with that group, but it's not everything I am, and I can go be something else as well.
Yeah. I think I was listening to a psychologist who was in the he was a Vietnam vet, Marine, who's talking about this, and he uses something called, I don't know if this is official or if he just made this up, but he calls it parts therapy or parts theory.
Mm,
And he just stayed out loud. Part of me loves this Marine identity that I had when I was a younger person, but now I'm out and I'm taking part of that with me. But some of this other stuff has to change. Um, and I think that's no that can be an effective way to transition identity. I was also thinking, some examples. I've had men in my office literally say, "I wish I would have died in Iraq or Afghanistan.
oh yeah, I know guys like this too.
I was supposed to." I heard people say that right to me in
Yep.
the office there. And I think wrapped up in those really, I would say, sad, for big, powerful statements is this. They bought full into their identity was that service member. It wasn't just a job. And of course it can be more than a job. At times we take great pride in it, but it doesn't last forever. It in fact it is a job because jobs end. And
Yes.
everyone, as long as you're alive, you will get separated from the
Yep.
military.
Yep.
It's hard. It's a hard
That
thing to learn, especially as a young man. Though it's hard to cue in on kind of
yeah.
these
But
values you're saying.
that part of the whatever that was, parts therapy,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
that idea is one that's expressed actually in neural retraining as well. So if you look at some of the sort of they call it kind of limbic system neural retraining, is specifically the Gupta program talks about how you have different parts of you. You sort of have like a protector part, and then you have an anxious part, and it's not to say you're a schizophrenic or something like that. But the point is that we sort of say, I am this one thing. But in reality, if you look at like what's going on internally, a lot of times you do have multiple kind of points of view on things, right? Like it can be as simple as like, should I stay? I really want to stay and have one more drink, but I know I should go home right now and get some sleep, right? And there's a conflict going on there internally. Um, and sometimes that's unconscious, sometimes it's more conscious, but it's kind of the same idea of like, you don't necessarily have to think of yourself as this one thing. There can be different parts to your identity that all work in concert. And again, it's not to say you have split personalities or something like that, but that you have different parts of you, and that
yeah,
can
and yeah. This is a
all
fact.
coexist.
Yeah, our psyche is made up of many different experiences and different parts. And this goes right back to what we said earlier with like transitioning to finding different jobs. Try it. Try different things. Talk to different people in different areas because you might like certain things in certain areas. I heard somebody speak. This is a while ago, but I liked this at the time. It was during my transition from music into mental health, and he was talking about career changes and or just artistic endeavors too, because these things, they take up time and they cost money, and it takes, if you're gonna try to make an album, for instance, it's gonna cost time and money. You have to buy equipment, and you're gonna have to practice and prepare and get the artwork done and then put it out, spend time with it. And with whatever we're working on, he's like, sometimes it fails and you walk away with a lesson. Like that's what it cost to learn
Yeah.
that lesson. Somebody said that to my wife when she was thinking about going into law school, and she was kind of like, "Yeah, I don't know, huge commitment. What if it doesn't work out? All these questions." And the person said, "Yeah, you give it a shot, and if you find out it's not working, it's you don't like it, or something even just doesn't work out. That's what it costs to find out where you are. And now where you are, you can still be okay." And look at it just like it was an investment. And of course, not all investments work out.
Yep. Yep. So, what are the key takeaways here that I think we
I
wrap up? I
I
thought this
think
was good.
I think first off, I think it's good that we're just validating this topic, transitioning in life, whether it's to with professional transition into a relationship or out of a relationship transition, whether it's aging and abilities, the transitions that we have as we
Yeah.
age, and certainly moving to different places. Um, I think just having awareness on what's going on inside of you, what matters, what you're struggling with, all these depths that we have. We've talked about how our psyche is just made up of a lot of different parts and a lot of different experiences. The more you can come to peace with some of these things, the more at peace you can be, maybe as you go through different transitions and try things out, and try and fail sometimes, and disappointment, and one step forward and two steps back and then three steps forward, because life is always going to be that. I don't want to be too general, but
Yeah.
um, I think what we're talking about is a lot of acceptance of what we're up against, but really coming to terms with what matters can bring the inner turmoil down as we move through different parts of life.
Yep.
What do you think
Yep.
about that?
Yeah, I
You buy
agree. And I think, what's that?
you buy that?
Yeah, I'll buy that. Uh, yeah. And I just think the biggest takeaway for me as I went through all of this stuff in my own life is, again, just not thinking that this stuff is just going to fall in your lap and be given to you, or someone's going to tell you this kind of stuff. It's like spending the time figuring out what actually matters to you. What does purpose look like for you? What does your why or your personal mission look like? And then once you at least have a rough idea of what that is, okay, now see if you can carve out a life, including a job that aligns with that. And if it doesn't, to your point, if it doesn't land right away, okay, that's fine. Like, cut away and go somewhere else, try something else, And if you find out later, like, oh, you know what? I thought this was important to me, but it's actually not. That's a valuable lesson too, And that's why, again, I'm a big believer in this stuff is fungible. Like, it can change over time, I think.
Yeah. I'd call that wisdom, maturity. And there's a ton of resources out to help people through this. You've talked about certain authors and programs and books,
Yep.
and things you can go through to help yourself find out what's important.
Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an Ironclad original series. Learn more at NavySealFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.